The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. To your descendants I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates."
You're a noisy lot. Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and a warm welcome to partners in this great enterprise. My name is Nick Gray. I'm a member of the Christian Balfour 100 group that has put this evening together for you. We, as a group of Christians, are delighted and honoured to bring you a programme through which both our communities, Jewish and Christian, can celebrate together the centenary of that short but amazing letter, the Balfour Declaration. Do you want to leave before midnight? For 1,000 years of Christian history, few people could read the Bible for themselves, or were inclined to stand up against the might of the institutional church. The anti-Semitic ravings and incitement by priests went unchecked. 500 years ago, the Reformation, coupled with the invention of the printing press, released the words of the Bible into the languages of ordinary people. Despite the writings of such as Martin Luther in his later years, Christians became aware that God did not hate the Jews. They were not cursed for eternity. In fact, he loved them and had plans only to give them a hope and a future. By the 19th century, the belief in a prophesied return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was widespread in the British Church. So, let us hear for ourselves what two of the giants of the Christian faith from that era had to say.
Friends, I must tell you that the word Israel is used more than 700 times in the Bible. By far the most common signification of the word in the Bible is as a name given to the whole Jewish nation, to all members of the 12 tribes which sprung from Jacob and were brought out of Egypt into Canaan. It is by taking these scriptures in their literal, normal sense, without unwarranted allegorization, which forces me to the conclusion that the nation of Israel will find a favorable future in the plan of God. Time would fail me if I attempted to quote all the passages in the Bible which refer to Israel, the history of Israel is revealed, and predict that in the end of this dispensation, the Jews are to be restored to their own land and to the favor of God. I can only say that to my eyes, the future redemption of Israel, the return to Palestine, and the national turning to God are as clearly and plainly revealed as any prophecy in God's word. The curses of the Jews were brought to pass literally. So also will be the blessings. The scattering was literal. So also will be the gathering. The pulling down of Zion was literal. So also will be the building up. the rejection of Israel was literal, so also will be the restoration.
There are days yet to come, for whose advent we may well be eager. There is the day when the knowledge of the Lord shall cover the earth as the waters cover the seas. There is the day, too, when Israel shall be restored to her own lands. I think we do not attach sufficient importance to the restoration of the Jews. We do not think enough about it. But certainly, if there is anything promised in the Bible, it is this. I imagine that you cannot read the Bible without seeing clearly that there is to be an actual restoration of the children of Israel. A day is coming, yea, it dawns already, when the whole world shall discern the true dignity of the chosen seed, and shall seek their company, because the Lord hath blessed them. The covenant made with Abraham to bless all nations by his seed is not revoked. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but the chosen nation shall not be blotted out from the book of remembrance. The Lord hath not cast away his people. He has never given their mother a bill of divorcement. He has not put them away. In a little wrath he hath hidden his face from them, but with great mercies will he gather them. O time, fly thou with rapid wing, and bring the auspicious day. There will again be a native government again. There shall again be the form of a body politic. A native government will be established, and a king will reign. Israel has now become alienated from her own lands. Her sons, though they can never forget the sacred dust of Palestine, yet die at a hopeless distance from her consecrated shores. But it shall not be so forever, for her sons shall again rejoice in her. Her land will be called Beulah. For as a young man marries a virgin, so shall her sons marry her. I will place you in your own land, is God's promise to them.
Now we welcome Pastor Dennis Greenidge to address our desire to reconnect with the spiritual heritage we have just heard of.
The early disciples of Jesus were predominantly Jewish, but as the church grew and became more Gentile, it left its Judaic roots, took on anti-Semitic attitudes, and began to persecute the Jewish people. For over 1,000 years, many Christian priests stirred and encouraged violent anti-Semitism. During this time, most ordinary people were unable to read the Bible, which was written in Latin. But with the intervention of the printing press, followed by the Reformation, the Bible was translated into the common languages of Europe. As it became more widely read, many realized that God did not hate the Jews and had not rejected them. In fact, the scriptures showed how he still loves them and has plans to give them a hope and a future. By the middle of the 19th century, a significant proportion of Bible-believing Christian leaders in Britain were ardent advocates of restorationism, the belief in the return of the Jews to Israel. They were Zionists before Zionism. As Christians, on this significant anniversary, we declare our desire and intention to reconnect with the Bible's positive picture of Israel and the Jewish people. We reject totally the anti-Semitic attitudes of the past, including the errors of replacement theology. And the violent anti-Semitism of today's Israel's boycotters. With the restorationists of the last 500 years, we affirm warmly our love for the people God loves. For the city where his name dwells, and for the land he says is his. We do this in the name of the God of Israel and in friendship towards our Jewish brothers and sisters.
And now the Adoramus Orchestra with soloist Nicola Hook bring us Laudate Dominum, Praise the Lord. And now the Holland Choir will sing the song Jerusalem. Despite widespread British belief in a future return to Israel, as we have heard, in Russia and Eastern Europe, the drudgery of persecution for exiled Jews in their shtetls was relentless under heavy Russian rule. In the 1890s, hope came to the persecuted Jewish exiles with the arrival of Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism. He was befriended and supported by Reverend William Heschler, an Anglican clergyman and chaplain to the British Embassy in Vienna. Heschler was an ardent lover of the Jewish people and a pillar of strength and encouragement to Herzl. Let's hear what they both had to say.
I have long studied the Bible, particularly the Old Testament prophecies about the Jewish people and the Messiah. Years ago, I came to the conclusion from my researches that the year 1897 had been foretold as the year beginning the Jewish liberation. So certain of this was I that I presented a memorandum to the British Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, urging him to take up the cause of the Jewish return to Palestine. I most sincerely hold, from the Word of God itself, that it is the duty of every Christian to love the Jews. I hold, too, most strongly, that it is not our part to try to convert the Jews to Christianity as a predisposition to enter Palestine or for the second coming. And in God's inscrutable will, all of this occurred in the years before I met Dr. Theodor Herzl or read his pamphlet, The Jewish State. It was surely God's will that I should help Dr. Herzl, who became a most dear friend. It was God's will that I should assist. And that will was made manifest in my being in Vienna from 1885 to 1910 in a position which enabled me to bring the attention of certain people of royal importance in Europe to the messianic figure of the Jewish leader. My memory of our work together for God's ancient people is precious and sacred to me, too sacred for me to dwell long upon it. I was with him at the beginning of his dreams, and I was with him at almost the last moment of his earthly life.
I have seen much of the persecution of our people in my work as a journalist. Perhaps the most detestable public example being the case of the French Jewish captain Dreyfus and the charade of his military trial. The Jewish question exists wherever Jews live, however small their number. Where it does not exist, it is imported by Jew immigrants. We naturally go where we are not persecuted, and yet still, persecution is a result of our appearance. By persecution, we cannot be exterminated. The strong Jew turns proudly to the rest when persecution bursts out. Entire branches of Judaism may disappear, break away. The tree lives. The Jews who will it shall achieve their state. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil and in our own homes peacefully die. The world will be liberated by our freedom. enriched by our wealth, magnified by our greatness. And whatever we attempt for our own benefit will rebound mightily and beneficially to the good of all mankind. It is true that we aspire to our ancient land. But what we want in that ancient land is a new blossoming of the Jewish spirit.
Israeli singer Tali Karen sings Ali, Ali.
Eli, Eli, שלא ייגמר לעולם. החול והים, אישוש של המים, ורק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, לישוש של המים, ורק השמיים, תפילת האדם. שלא ייגמר לעולם, החול והים, אישוש של המים, ורק השמיים, תפילת החול והים, לישוש של המים, ורק השמיים, תפילת
As we move on into the 20th century, we see a second providential Jewish-Christian partnership beginning. Arthur Balfour was a member of the British government and a Bible-believing Christian. Chaim Weizmann, a leading Zionist, was an eminent scientist. They became fast friends and allies in the Zionist cause.
I developed a way of distilling acetone from organic materials. Do you remember the first time we met? You offered the Jews Uganda for a homeland. I said, Mr. Balfour, suppose I were to offer you Paris instead of London. Would you take it? And you said, but Dr. Weitzman, we have London.
And you said, true, but we had Jerusalem when London was a marsh.
You remember.
And I asked if there were many Jews like you.
Yes. And I replied, I speak the mind of millions of Jews whom you will never see and who cannot speak for themselves.
If that is so, you will one day be a force. It's curious, the Jews I meet are quite different.
My dear Balfour, you meet the wrong kind of Jews. Here we are, embroiled in the midst of an horrendous war in Europe that has great repercussions for the Middle East with the Turk allied with Germany. I have no doubt Britain will win this conflict. But we Zionists need some definite encouragement from your government. If the Jews can find an asylum, a safe home in their native land, then the full flowering of their genius will burst forth and propagate. The submerged Jews of the ghettos of Eastern Europe will, in Palestine, find a new life and develop a new and a powerful identity. And the educated Jews from all over the world will render the University of Jerusalem a center of intellectual life and a radiant nurse of science and the arts.
You know, the position of you Jews is certainly unique. For you, race, religion, and country are interrelated as they are in the case of no other religion and no other country on earth. We in the cabinet are formulating a document to this effect. You have many friends in Lloyd George's war cabinet. I know that with the issue of this declaration, I shall please one group, the Zionists, and displease another, the Jews who wish to assimilate. I've decided to please your group because you stand for a great idea.
As the momentum gathered, in the preparation of a statement to the Jewish community, October the 31st, 1917 was a key date. On this day in London, the British War Cabinet met to finalise the wording of their declaration. At the same time, General Allenby was commanding a vital battle for the conquest of Palestine at Beersheba. Hear now how these two events worked together in God's plans.
In 1916, in the midst of the First World War, David Lloyd George became Prime Minister and Arthur Balfour his Foreign Secretary. Lloyd George immediately created a new and smaller cabinet. These men represented different social backgrounds and all three political parties. This new cabinet took an interest in seeing a return of the Jewish people to their land. The first meetings between cabinet members, Mark Sykes and Chaim Weizmann, began in February 1917. In June, Lord Rothschild and Chaim Weizmann submitted a draft of a declaration for the cabinet to consider. Further drafts were discussed by the cabinet during September and October. Lloyd George and Arthur Balfour planned to issue a Zionist statement while simultaneously invading Palestine.
Following a disastrous defeat at Gallipoli in 1915, Australian and New Zealand soldiers known as Anzacs and British forces based in Egypt were entrusted with protecting the Suez Canal from an expected Turkish attack from Palestine. This force included Anzac horsemen, Australian light horse, and New Zealand mounted rifles, plus British infantry and cavalry. By the end of 1916, they had reached El Arish, thereby clearing the Sinai of Turkish forces and creating a safe buffer for the Suez Canal. The Anzac and British force was poised on the edge of Palestine. Coincidentally, a new government then came into power in Britain, and Prime Minister David Lloyd George wanted to push for a strategic victory in the East. Both he and Foreign Secretary Balfour were also influenced by the evangelical Christian teaching that Israel would one day be restored to its covenanted land. Their sympathies lay with the British-led conquest of the Holy Land, and in early 1917, Lloyd George authorised the British and Anzac force to begin the campaign into Palestine, with Jerusalem as a major goal. Victory would put Britain into the best position to determine the political future of the region after the war. However, following two humiliating defeats at Gaza, a new strategy was needed. A Corps commander, General Sir Philip Chetwode, then devised a radical plan to strike at the more exposed southeastern end of the Turkish line at Beersheba. Never in history had an army successfully entered the land of Israel from the direction of the Negev desert. The Turks had numerous defences on the western and southwestern approaches to Beersheba. These positions would be attacked by British infantry. There were fewer defences on the east, facing the dry and barren desert, and included the strategic Tel el-Saba, the ancient Beersheba. These positions would be attacked by the mostly Anzac mounted force. A new commander, General Edmund Allenby, who arrived in June 1917, accepted Chetwode's strategy. With valuable information supplied by the Jewish espionage ring Nili, Allenby developed a master plan, the success of which depended upon complete secrecy. The British also had to fool the Turkish and German leadership into believing the attack on Beersheba was merely a feint, and that the main assault would be at Gaza, while in fact it was the opposite.
The Balfour Declaration was a carefully considered political statement that reflected the personal worldviews of the members of the cabinet. Many versions and submissions were considered, but the final decision on the government's declaration came from Lloyd George's 10-man war cabinet. Who were these men? What kind of faith did they have? Let's meet them. David Lloyd George was from a small village in Wales. He was raised by his uncle, a Welsh Baptist pastor. In Wales, in those days, the teaching of the Bible was one of the highest values of society. During the Great War, Lloyd George liked to comment on how the place names in Palestine were so familiar to him. He never wavered in his commitment to the restoration of Israel. Arthur Balfour was perhaps the most committed Christian in the cabinet. As a young boy, he was tutored at home by his family's pastor. His niece noted that long before he ever heard of Zionism, Balfour had felt a particular interest in the people of the book. His mother, also a Scottish Presbyterian, played a key role in imparting Bible teaching to him. As foreign minister and a former prime minister, Balfour had great influence in the cabinet. His interest in the restoration of Israel went beyond political necessity. Jan Smuts received a rich biblical upbringing in South Africa. He supported the declaration. In 1917, he said he hoped to see in generations to come a great Jewish state rising there once more. Edward Carson was an Ulster lawyer who grew up in a Presbyterian family. In his adult life, he was a Protestant symbol in Northern Ireland. During the cabinet debates of 1917, Carson put his support behind the Declaration. Andrew Bonner Law was raised in the home of a Presbyterian minister in New Brunswick, Canada. As a young man, he moved to Britain, where he entered politics, eventually becoming Prime Minister. He supported the Declaration. Arthur Henderson was a prominent member of the Labour Party. He was converted at age 16 to a personal Christian faith by the evangelist Gypsy Smith. He later became a lay preacher and the pastor of a Methodist church. He supported the Declaration. Henderson's colleague, George Barnes, was also a Labour Party representative in this coalition government. Barnes favored the Declaration. In October 1917, Chaim Weizmann claimed that George Barnes was one of the men who advocated our cause most strongly. George Curzon was the son of an Anglican minister. In cabinet, he raised objections to the Declaration. This was understandable, since he was the only cabinet member to have ever visited Palestine. He spoke of the small size of the land and the inhospitable terrain. Despite his practical concerns, he gave his approval. Alfred Milner was a career politician committed to the empire. He believed the Jewish national home would be of great benefit to Britain. He approved of the Declaration. Edwin Montagu was the only cabinet member to oppose the Declaration. He told his cabinet colleagues that he feared a Jewish homeland could become an international Jewish ghetto. Others in Britain shared these fears. Montagu was sincere in his concerns, but he failed to sway the cabinet.
British and Anzac troops began moving towards their positions during the second half of October. The attack upon Beersheba was scheduled for the 31st of October, 1917. Horsemen of the mostly Anzac Desert Corps rode southeast and then came behind Beersheba from the east. The actual capture of Beersheba and of its vital water wells was entrusted to General Chauvel and the Desert Mounted Corps. The impending Battle of Beersheba was to be a turning point in the Middle East campaign and in world history. It should come as no real surprise that such a world-changing event would occur at Beersheba, associated as it is with Abraham, with whom God Almighty cut a covenant, confirming and sealing with an oath the promise giving the land of Israel to Abraham's physical seed.
A final draft of the British government's declaration to the Jewish people was presented to the War Cabinet on the afternoon of October 31st, a decisive meeting. The minutes record that Balfour told the Cabinet it was desirable that some declaration favorable to the aspiration of the Jewish nationalists should now be made. He understood national home to mean some form of protectorate, under which full facilities would be given to the Jewish people to work out their own salvation and to build up a real center of national life and culture. When the vote was taken, the matter was settled by the simple fact that the majority wanted it. It is difficult to find a parallel situation in history where a world power offered such significant unilateral political assistance to a tiny, dispersed global community. The Balfour Declaration was a unique, positive gesture from the British cabinet to the Jewish people of the world. Even though it was a political statement, it was given in a spirit of biblical belief and illustrated cooperation between Christian evangelicals and the Jewish people.
Early on the 31st of October, British infantry attacked the Turkish trenches on the southwest of Beersheba. The bulk of the fighting fell upon these infantry. By noon, they had achieved their stated goals. Anzac horsemen also moved towards their objectives to the east of the town. New Zealanders and some Australians attacked the well-defended high point of Tel El Saba, the Beersheba of Abraham's time, and captured it by mid-afternoon. The Turks then began to withdraw, but planned to destroy the valuable water wells. It was essential that Beersheba was captured with its water wells intact. Not only were these wells essential to water a thirsty army, but the next stage of Allenby's plan depended upon their preservation. By now it was getting late in the day, and General Chauvel needed to capture Beersheba quickly. Contrary to military reason, he released the Australian 4th Light Horse Brigade to charge directly at Beersheba. They had never trained for a mounted charge, as they were essentially infantry being taken to the front line on horseback. Interestingly, at about this time, the men of the British War Cabinet were beginning their discussion on the Zionist proposal for establishing a Jewish national entity in Palestine.
At about 4:30 p.m., word of the cabinet decision left the room. Mark Sykes rushed down the corridor to a waiting Chaim Weitzman, telling him, "It's a boy." 2 days later, Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour penned a short letter to Lord Rothschild that bears his name today as the Balfour Declaration.
Also, at about 4:30 in the afternoon of the 31st of October, upwards of 600 Australian mounted infantry moved onto the plain some 6 kilometres east of Beersheba. Although under fire from artillery and from the air, they made their way across the plain, at the trot, then the canter, and finally the gallop. They rode so fast that they galloped under the Turkish artillery guns, whose marksmen could not adjust the range quick enough. They then cleared the first Turkish trenches, dismounted, and encountered stiff hand-to-hand combat. Some men also rode directly into the town and were able to stop the destruction of the valuable water wells. By about 6 o'clock in the evening, Beersheba, the town associated with Abraham, was safely in the hands of the Australian, British, and New Zealand soldiers, and the victory which Lloyd George and Allenby needed had been obtained. Without the victory at Beersheba, on the 31st of October, the Balfour Declaration was just a worthless piece of paper. Beersheba opened the door to the conquest of Palestine, the land of covenant promise. With this perspective in mind, we can indeed see that the Battle of Beersheba on the 31st of October 1917 was more than just a military victory. The two pivotal events that took place simultaneously in London and Beersheba could not have been engineered by man alone. Behind them surely was the hand of a sovereign God.
Two days after these events, on the 31st of October, the 2nd of November, Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour sends a short letter to Lord Rothschild for the Zionist Federation. It will be read to us by the present holder of the title, Lord Roddy Balfour.
Foreign Office, November the 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour.
Please take this letter to Lord Rothschild at his address in Piccadilly. Thank you.
Reverend David Campbell helps us to remember God's hand in the production of the Balfour Declaration.
When Theodor Herzl set forth his vision of a Jewish state as a haven for his persecuted people, the Christian minister, William Heckler, stood alongside him, encouraging him and introducing him to influential men. Together, their partnership put Zionism on the world agenda. One of those Zionists, Dr. Chaim Weizmann, advocated strongly in Britain for a national homeland for the Jewish people. He became good friends with Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour and Prime Minister Lloyd George, giving them insight into Zionist theology. Both of these influential leaders ardently supported the Zionist dream because of their biblical faith. They were instrumental in the issuing of the Balfour Declaration and its later incorporation into international law. General Jan Christian Smuts, a Christian member of the War Cabinet in 1917, regarded the Jewish resettlement of Palestine as an act of moral reparation due from Christendom to the Jewish people. He called the Balfour Declaration one of the greatest acts of history. The strong Christian background of these leaders was a crucial influence upon the Balfour Declaration, and we see God's hand in the Jewish-Christian partnerships of 100 years ago. Many Jewish-Christian partnerships exist today. Aliyah, bringing Jewish people home to Israel, social assistance, caring for the needy in the land, expressing the love of God in many practical ways. May these partnerships between Jews and Christians multiply and flourish as we work together.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year is the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Jerusalem and its return to Jewish rule after nearly 2,000 years. In recognition of this, we present a special selection of songs. We're going to hear again from Tali Karen, but first, Juliet Dawn is a Christian gospel recording artist. She has partnered with her mum, Brenda Taylor, who accompanies her tonight. I think she does anyway. Juliet has partnered with mum Brenda Taylor, who accompanies her tonight, for over 25 years, writing and recording music and ministering original Christian songs. She also composed the celebratory poem, which you will find in our souvenir magazine. Brenda has an Israel-focused Christian ministry to teach and promote understanding of the Jewish roots of Christianity. She has pioneered and pastored churches for over 40 years with her husband Roy, and also finds time to be a prolific songwriter. Together, Juliet and Brenda marry their gifts to bring a unique ministry of music and worship. And tonight, Juliet sings the wonderful, emotive song, City of God.
Thank you.
Today Jehovah strengthen you, protect you from all your enemies. Born by divine decree, pledged from eternity, city of God, Jerusalem. Wounded and sorely bruised, blood shed and battle cruel, Israel, we stand with you today and pray. Peace within your ancient walls, dignity, prosperity. May Jehovah strengthen you and protect you from all your enemies. Peace within your ancient walls, dignity, prosperity. May Jehovah strengthen you, protect you from all your enemies, protect you from all your enemies, protect you from all your
Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, my lords, ladies, and distinguished guests, good evening. It's such an honor to be here on this stage of this amazing venue and to celebrate such an important event. The next song that I'm going to sing for you is my new single, Magical Powers. Its words were written by a 13-year-old child, and when I read them, I was moved into tears. So I like, first of all, to sing it to the organizers, the people that put this event and created that magical evening. But there is a line there that's saying, let's people speak out, let's people's voices be heard. So I like to sing to each one of you here that's speaking words of love and wisdom to our community. You are our magical powers. If I had magical powers, I would travel across the 7 seas, flying through white-top waves. I'd cure the weak and save the lives of the innocent, help those in need of food and water. I'd change the thoughts of evil and stop global warming with the fingertip. I'll do all this and more. I'd make an end to poverty, destroy pain and suffering, and make a place of peace in the wars. Comfort the child who cries, would open pathways that didn't exist. I'll teach people to let go and forgive, speak out to make people's voice heard. If I had magical powers, I'd walk on water and be invisible, make the heart warm and glow. I would control the weather and make it snow, and make people feel the worries could just disappear, and make an end to poverty, destroy pain and suffering, and make a place of peace in the wars. Comfort the child who cried, would open pathways that didn't exist. I'll teach people to let go and forgive, speak out to make people's voice heard. Knowing people's life would get it better, make me stronger, feeling stronger, make an end to poverty, destroy pain and suffering, and make a place of peace in the wars. Comfort the child who cries, would open pathways that didn't exist. I'll teach people to let go and forgive, speak out to make people's voice heard. If I had magical powers, I'd make people feel like the worries could just disappear. I'll do all of these and more. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my wonderful musician, the orchestra, the choir, and our conductor. For the next song, I created in honor of that song, this gold dress. For one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Jerusalem. Here in the Royal Albert Hall, Jerusalem of Gold. אוויר הרים צלול כיין וריח אורנים נישא ברוח הבאים עם כל פעמונים ובתרגמת אילן ובן שבויה בחלומה העיר השם בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לחול שירי אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לחול שירי אני כינור. איך יבשו בורות המים כיכר השוק ריקה ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה ובמראות אשר בסלע מייללות רוחות ואין יורד לים המלח בדרך יריחו ירושלים של זהב של נחושת ושל אור הלא לחול שירי אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לחול שירי אני כינור. כשמך צורב את השפתיים כנשיקת שרף אם אשכחך ירושלים אשר גולה זהב ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לחול שירי אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לחול שירי אני
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second half of our evening together. Thank you. Today's black churches almost universally have a love for Israel, and thousands they haven't sung yet. and thousands make pilgrimage every year to Israel from around the world. In recognition of this Christian support for Israel, we welcome a choir from the Nigerian Redeemed Christian Church of God.
Forever
the choir from the Redeemed Christian Church of God. We're now going to sing a hymn of praise to God that we can all join in with. We have already seen how the exiled Jews of Russia and Eastern Europe hoped in their suffering for the restoration of their ancient homeland. We have a record of the impact that news of the Balfour Declaration had on the Polish village of Sokolka. The Israeli Dance Institute will return now to reenact this.
dem Aleph Beis und der Rebbeler kleiner Kinderlech, dem Aleph Beis. Seht she Kinderlech, gedenk she Teiere, was sie lernen do. Sag she noch einmal und tage noch einmal, komet's Aleph O. Sag she noch einmal und tage noch einmal, komet's Aleph O. Seht she Kinderlech, gedenk she Teiere, was sie lernen do. Sag she noch einmal und tage noch einmal, komet's Aleph O. Sag she noch einmal und tage noch einmal, komet's Aleph O. Mazel tov, Simon tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, Simon tov, Simon tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, Simon tov. Yehelanu, 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 Ulechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulechol Yisrael. David melech Yisrael, Chai Chai v'kayam. David melech Yisrael, Chai Chai v'kayam. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Ulechol Yisrael. David melech Yisrael, Chai Chai v'kayam. David melech Yisrael, Chai Chai v'kayam.
Weren't they wonderful? Get to my age, you couldn't do one of those steps. In our historical walk, we move forward now to 1920. The occasion is a rally held by the Zionist Federation to celebrate the granting to Britain of the mandate to govern Palestine and to guide the Jewish homeland to independence. The place is here in the Royal Albert Hall, right where you are sitting. The invited speaker spoke from this spot. Thank you. Please will you welcome the Right Honourable Arthur Balfour, one-time Home Secretary and the signatory of the Balfour Declaration.
For long, I have been a convinced Zionist, and it is in that character that I come before you today. Though in my most sanguine moments I never foresaw, I never even conceived the possibility of the great work of Palestinian reconstruction would happen so soon, or that indeed it was likely to happen in my own lifetime. Who would have thought 5 or 6 years ago a speaker in the Albert Hall would be able to recount as an accomplished fact that the great powers of the world had elected to accept the declaration addressed to Lord Rothschild and had consented to give a mandate to Britain, the country which is at the forefront of those who desire to see this policy brought to a successful issue. These are happy results. These are results on which we may all congratulate ourselves. I speak as a man who is not a Jew and who necessarily, therefore, looks at the Jewish question from outside. We are embarked on a great adventure. By we, I mean on the one side the Jewish people, and on the other side the mandatory power of Palestine. We are partners in this great enterprise, and I feel assured that we shall not fail you, and you will not fail us. And if I am right, as I sure I am, in this prophecy of hope and confidence, then surely we may look forward with a happy gaze to a future in which Palestine will indeed, and in the fullest measure and degree of success, be made a home for the Jewish people.
And now, with Pastor Clive Urquhart, we recognise Britain's betrayal of the intent of the Balfour Declaration and her mishandling of the mandate given to her.
Through the Balfour Declaration, Britain issued a pledge to act on behalf of God's chosen people, the Jews. The post-war mandate for Palestine contained the Balfour Declaration and enshrined it in international law. It tasked Britain to secure the establishment of the Jewish national home, and we believe that God chose Britain for this task. Under the mandate, Britain began to establish the institutions of government, encourage economic development, and build infrastructure. However, most of the military serving in Palestine at that time did not carry the same vision. They even acted against their own government's policy, sometimes with tragic results. For this and many other reasons, Britain ultimately failed to live up to her obligations. Matters came into a head in the late 1930s. Under severe pressure from violent opposition in Palestine, Britain drastically reduced the number of Jews allowed to enter the land to 75,000 over 5 years through the White Paper of 1939. Thus, during the Holocaust and in the years after the end of the war, Jews trying to flee Europe were denied this route of escape. Britain failed both the Jewish people and God. As Christians, we express our profound sorrow and repentance for the failures of our nation before God and to the Jewish people. May the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob extend his mercy and forgiveness to our nation and heal the wounds of the Jewish people.
And so we come to 1948. God has been faithful in keeping his promises, particularly his covenant promise to Father Abraham, with which we began this evening. Nigerian soloist Caleb Alalade will now proclaim God's faithfulness to Israel with his adaptation of the well-loved hymn, "Great is Thy Faithfulness."
Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Oh, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. And this is what God sings over you. Great is my love for you. I am your Father. You are my greatest desire. my beloved, for I have loved you with everlasting love, am always faithful and will never change. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with millions beside. Oh, great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning, new mercies I see. ירושלים גילובה כל אוהביה. על חומותייך עיר דוד הפקדתי שומרים כל היום וכל הלילה. על חומותייך עיר דוד הפקדתי שומרים כל היום וכל הלילה. אנא תתשרנה מבנך יליסבה צנה אנא תשרנה חיילי במושבה אנא תתשרנה מבנך יליסבה צנה אנא תתשרנה מבנך יליסבה. Lev Sameach, Kuru Alim, Lev Sameach, Kuru Alim, Lev Sameach, Kuru Alim, Kuru Alim, Lev Sameach, Shalom Aleichem, Evenu Shalom Aleichem, Evenu Shalom Aleichem, Evenu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom.
Can't do those steps either. Weren't they wonderful? Gosh. Come and dance in my church next week. Can I invite the young people to come up on stage, please? You don't know what they're going to do yet. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've spent this evening looking at past events and celebrating what God has done through both Christians and Jews in the past. And it's been wonderful. But the end has not been reached. Messiah has not yet come, or come back, depending on your point of view. Israel and the Jewish people still need to know that they have friends in this world. So will you please welcome representatives of the Millennial generation to take us forward into the next 100 years as they read the Balfour 100 Declaration.
As representatives of the current and emerging generation of the Judeo-Christian faith, we stand together today in agreement to honor and celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, which was a statement of support for the re-establishment of the Jewish homeland.
This declaration came about because of Christian men such as Lord Balfour, who had a biblical understanding of God's plans and purposes for the restoration of the Jewish people and the land of Israel. Similarly, we are standing here today holding steadfast to the same biblical foundation that these men of faith had.
Today, we honor the Declaration by acknowledging Israel as the national homeland for the Jewish people, as well as supporting and encouraging peaceful coexistence, equality, and cooperation between all communities in the nation. We also recognize Israel's outstanding contribution to the world in areas such as technology, medicine, and agriculture, and in leading democracy in the Middle East.
As followers of the Jewish Jesus, we commit ourselves to encouraging and helping the Church in the United Kingdom to return to its biblical roots. And to repair any broken bridges with the Jewish people and the nation of Israel. Finally, we acknowledge God's everlasting covenant with Israel.
Jeremiah 31:35 says, "He who appoints the sun to shine by day, who decrees the moon and stars to shine by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord Almighty is his name. Only if these decrees vanish from my sight, declares the Lord, will Israel ever cease from being a nation before me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are shortly going to have to bring our evening to a close. But before we do, we have 3 short messages of encouragement. And first, I would like to introduce Aryeh Miller, Director of the Zionist Federation.
Ambassador Regev, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, and friends, it really is my honor to bring you a message of support from the Zionist Federation and to say just a few words. First, I've got to say, wow, what an amazing event this has been. I have to say a huge congratulations to everyone who has made this event possible and put on a truly remarkable and uplifting celebration, not only of the Balfour Declaration, but of Israel itself. We've been able to sit here, Jews and Christians together, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of a British commitment to Jewish self-determination. At the foot of that commitment, the Balfour Declaration, just before Arthur James Balfour penned his signature, it was written, "I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation." And so we've clung on to that pillar of our history, celebrating the anniversary every year and holding fast to the significant role we were able to play together in what later would become the establishment of the State of Israel. But for me, the Balfour Declaration is actually a very personal document. Not because I have any historical ancestry to connect me to it, but because as a Brit, and as a Jew, and as a Zionist, the Balfour Declaration manages to encompass my entire being in just 67 words. For me, the Balfour Declaration was the continuation of those famous words from Theodor Herzl. Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream. Herzl was a dreamer. He believed in something that never came to fruition in his lifetime, yet he never stopped believing. Every wall he hit, he climbed right over. Every stumbling block that was placed in front of him, he hurdled with pride. And to every naysayer, he said, Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream. Here tonight, we can't only look backwards, though. We absolutely must look forwards. If the Balfour Declaration was the foundation stone of the house, then Israel today is the top floor. We might still have the finishing touches to put to the roof, but we have a house that is standing strong and will not be toppled, not now, not ever. The future of Israel is one that excites me and hopefully excites you too. There are thousands of people here tonight, but there are many thousands more not here. I want each and every one of you here to make a commitment. Find something in Israel that excites you. Don't just take what someone else is excited about. Really find something that speaks to you. Take that excitement and go and speak to 3 friends about it. And once you've spoken to those 3, speak to 3 more, and then 3 more, and then 3 more, until we have a country full of Zionists, a country full of supporters for the essence of the Balfour Declaration, a national home for the Jewish people. The Balfour Declaration is a foundation stone that Jews and Christians can all be proud of, and it's one whose legacy will continue to live on for hundreds of years to come. The Zionist Federation is proud to stand and work alongside our Christian friends. Thank you to all of the organizers of tonight, of this incredible event, and thank you all for coming out and showing that you truly care about and love Israel.
And now, with a Christian message from Jerusalem, will you please welcome Jürgen Bühler, President of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
My Lord, ladies and gentlemen, what a privilege and what a joy to be here today with you to celebrate 100 years of the Balfour Declaration. Looking tonight at this evening's program, I believe we all come to the conclusion that God's powerful hand is resting upon your nation, that there is a special calling on Great Britain. Many people say there is a Cyrus calling on your nation. Cyrus, the Persian king who was foretold centuries before he actually was born by the great Jewish prophet Isaiah, who says, "Behold, Cyrus, my shepherd, my servant, he will say to Jerusalem, be rebuilt, and he will speak to my temple and say, be rebuilt, and your foundations shall be laid." The Balfour Declaration indeed was a declaration to the world to rebuild Zion and to rebuild Jerusalem. Out of the Balfour Declaration, the desert has become a green place. Out of the Balfour Declaration, Jewish people from the ends of the earth returned back to their homeland and they rebuilt the ancient cities. Today I have been at the British Museum and I looked what is called the Cyrus cylinder. And you could read exactly what he was doing, calling forth the rebuilding of the temple, calling forth the restructuring of the nation, and allowing the Jewish people to return to their homeland. Your nation did this in our modern days, and you should be proud of you. This little cylinder also stated that the Cyrus Declaration was maybe the first declaration of human rights. And I believe this is also true for your nation, because the establishment of the State of Israel was also paralleled by the establishment of many other nations in that region. There are many people who say the Balfour Declaration is a colonial declaration, but the truth is exactly the opposite. It's a declaration calling for freedom for the nations. And I know my Bible tells me that he who blesses Israel, he shall be blessed. And looking at you here tonight, it makes me believe that God has a great future for your nation. The best days are still ahead of you. May God bless your nation. May God bless the nation of Israel. God bless you all.
And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, our third speaker, it gives me great pleasure tonight to welcome to the stage the Ambassador of the State of Israel, His Excellency Mark Regev.
I thank you so much for that warm welcome. As we say in Hebrew, Toda Rabah. It is really an amazing experience to be here, to represent my country, to represent the people of Israel, to be here in this amazing, amazing evening. And I want to thank the organizers, and especially Tim Vince, who stood at the head of the committee, and put it all together. Tim, well done. I want to thank all the performers, the wonderful orchestra, the choir, all the singers, the actors. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Some of you came from near, some of you came from far, but your presence is greatly, greatly appreciated. It is simply wonderful to be here at the Great Albert Hall with an audience, with a population that is united in support of Israel, and here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. And I believe very firmly that it is the right thing to do to celebrate the Balfour Declaration. Thank you for that. Because in issuing the Balfour Declaration, the United Kingdom stood up for what is right. The United Kingdom stood up for justice. The United Kingdom looked at the Jewish people and said, here is a people that has been in exile, that has been dispersed, that has been scattered amongst the nations, a people that had been discriminated against, a people that had been persecuted, a people that faced horrors maybe like no other people. And it said, this people also deserves the right to be free. This people deserves the right to a homeland. This people deserves the right to independence. And the Balfour Declaration played a crucial role in galvanizing international support for Zionism and allowing my people to return home and re-establish our national freedom. But there is one other reason why I think all of us can be proud of the Balfour Declaration. Not only did you do the right thing by the Jewish people, you did the right thing for another reason. Because in having a hand in helping to re-establish the Jewish state, you also played a role in establishing the Middle East's only strong, stable democracy. Here in the United Kingdom, you have a history. You have the Mother of Parliaments. You have the Magna Carta. You have individual liberties, freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom to organize. These are freedoms that originated in many ways in this great land. And when you look at the Middle East, and you look at all those countries, you see despotism after despotism after despotism. You see autocracy and autocracy. There is only one country that stands out as a beacon of liberty and freedom, where democratic elections take place, where the press is free, where the population is free, and that is my country. That is Israel. And so you can be proud of the role that you played, that Britain played, in helping to establish the Middle East's only democracy. So I say to each and every one of you, those who've come from near and those who've come from far, that all of you've come tonight to this important event to celebrate a centenary to the Balfour Declarations. I say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your support, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your solidarity. It is appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to have a finale song in which Caleb and the orchestra and the choir are joined together I just want to offer a heartfelt thank you to all the people that have given time, energy, and talent, and in many cases paid their own way to come here and to put on this evening's program for you. Our two historical speakers came from Canada and from Australia. The soldiers came from Australia via Israel to do a reenactment of the Battle of Beersheba just last week. And of course our Dutch choir here came all the way from Holland. So we're going to sing together now. We're going to bring you now a Christian song, In His Love.
Let us sing to God our Savior. He has come to be our God. Though we walk the path of darkness, He will lead us through the night. He has come to bring salvation. He has come to be our light. He has come to bring forgiveness. Jesus is the gift of life. In His love we have victory. In His sacrifice we have overcome. In His love we have glory. In His love we have the peace of Christ we
can't let you go without saying thank you very much for coming tonight. Have a safe journey home. Goodbye, God bless, Leitraat, and Shalom.